1 year after a controversial referendum on Catalan secession, there are new governments in both Madrid and Barcelona. But how much has really changed on both sides? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. Last year, Spain's government insisted that Catalonia's vote for secession was illegal and sent paramilitary police to stop it. When the Catalan regional parliament declared independence a few weeks later, Madrid imposed central rule. Some Catalan leaders fled to exile. Others are in prison. Spain now has a new prime minister, but most of the issues raised by last year's vote remain unresolved. And again this weekend, there were huge crowds of protesters on the streets of Barcelona. We'll bring in our guests in a moment, but first, this report from Paul Chadurjian.
Riot police confronted hundreds of pro-independence protesters at the main door of the Catalan parliament in Barcelona late into the night. These demonstrations followed a march that police say attracted more than 180,000 people earlier in the day. Tens of thousands marked the first anniversary of the failed bid for secession from Spain, bringing parts of their wealthy northeastern region home to 7.5 million people to a standstill.
It has already been a year from October 1st. We voted regardless of all the obstacles imposed by a fascist, oppressive government that did nothing but assault innocent people who went only with a ballot in hand. Today we go out to claim that we did. We defeated the Spanish state by being able to hold and win a referendum.
Spain's constitutional court declared last year's referendum illegal. On the day of the referendum, Spanish riot police stormed polling stations across the region and clamped down on protesters. Hundreds of people were injured. The violent crackdown brought international condemnation. The Catalan Assembly officially declared independence on October 27th, but it was not internationally recognized. The Spanish government dissolved Catalonia's parliament and imposed direct rule. A year on, pro-independence Catalans want their declaration of independence to be recognized. They're also demanding the release of jailed government ministers and civic organization leaders who were at the helm of the failed secession drive.
It was important to do something today because throughout this year we've not made much progress. The Catalan government hasn't done much, and we're determined to make the Catalan Republic or to make a legal referendum.
Madrid's direct rule of Catalonia ended in June when Pedro Sánchez replaced Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy in a vote of no confidence. Sánchez is against independence, but his approach is softer than that of his predecessor. His government agreed to move jailed Catalan politicians out of prisons in Madrid to ones in Catalonia.
The election of Pedro Sánchez is actually good news because he has a softer approach and is open to dialogue, but it's not clear if he has specific political objectives or he can resolve the situation because he just doesn't have a parliamentary majority.
The promise of talks between the Spanish and Catalan leaders has yet to come to fruition. So for these demonstrators, the fight for independence remains in the hands of the people. Paul Chadurjian, Al Jazeera.
All right, let's bring in our guests in Barcelona. Jordi Vilanova, he's the National Secretary with the Catalan National Assembly. That's a grassroots organization supporting Catalan independence. In Madrid, Toni Roldan, a member of parliament with the Ciudadanos Party, meaning the Citizens Party. And in London, Gabriel Garoom, a researcher with King's College in London who focuses on conflict and nationalism. Gentlemen, welcome to you all. Gabriel, let me start with you. How much or how little has changed in Spain with regard to this issue in the past 12 months?
Well, it has changed a great amount, actually. We've got changes in both governments. We had a very difficult aftermath after the referendum with all the central government taking power of the Catalan institutions. So yeah, it has been a very difficult year trying to, both actors actually finding a way to keep their own political agendas. I think we are in a kind of a deadlock right now.
Jordi, from your perspective, what does it say that 1 year on there were these large demonstrations and that there were even some clashes that happened?
Well, the issue here is that there's a lot of unrest here in Catalonia because people are extremely unhappy with how things have turned out, especially after the 1st of October 2017. The people who protested yesterday throughout the day, because it wasn't just the main demonstration in the evening yesterday, it was also students' demonstrations during the day, several demonstrations throughout Catalonia. So there's a general feeling of really very serious unhappiness with what's gone on. The issue here, of course, is that after the 1st of October and the suspension of home rule, the government has been pretty much hamstrung by Madrid with continuing limitations on the budgets without being able to carry on normal government. Besides the fact that although it's an illegal referendum, you know, the respect for the opinion of half the population at least. I mean, we don't really know that it's whether it's 47% or 52% or how many there are until we have a referendum. And Madrid is not helping at all. I mean, the new government in Madrid was brought about, in fact, with the votes of Catalan separatists within the Spanish Congress, in the hope that something could become of that. But it's apparent that Madrid's hamstrung as well. The Madrid government is being limited by both Ciudadanos and the Popular Party, who are shifting right because they're being pressured by Vox, which is an extreme right party, which is bringing cases, prosecutions against the parliamentarians who are in prison and the civic leaders. So the situation really is in deadlock, as the other guest said.
You know, Tony, if you could pick up a little bit on what Jordi was saying there. He was talking about new governments now being in place. Does that go anywhere towards stopping this political deadlock, or is this going to continue for some time?
Look, I do think that the main problem we have is that in Catalonia, the radical nationalist government we have now, led by a man called Quim Torra, who's the president, simply does not respect the plurality of views that you have in Catalonia. And that's the fundamental problem we have. This guy has written in the past that Spanish people and those that disagree with nationalism have some sort of DNA problems, and he has had an openly supremacist attitude towards those that are non-nationalist. It happens that in Catalonia, and I include myself in that group because I'm also a Catalan, despite nationalists not liking it, we have had 4 regional elections over the last 6-7 years. Catalan nationalism has never got more than 50% of the vote, right? So they have had the opportunity to express themselves. Obviously, the Constitution, the Spanish Constitution, like any other European constitution, does not recognize the right of self-determination in their constitution. It simply doesn't exist, only for St. Kitts and Nevis, I think, in the world. But they did have their, I mean, you can change the constitution and try to do a referendum, but they did have the opportunity, as I say, to express themselves for 4 times. They didn't get a majority, but still they decided to go ahead and declare a unilateral independence from Catalonia, from Spain, right? And this is basically subverting the Spanish constitution. It's something extremely, extremely grave. It's something extremely worrying, right? My rights as a Catalan citizen that wants to be Spanish and wants to remain European were brutally violated by the decision of the Catalan parliament without sufficient majority to go ahead with these laws that subverted the constitution and created a Catalan republic that is imaginary and that does not have the democratic support and that was not approved through the democratic process, right? And this referendum they did, I reject violence. I think there were terrible images that day. I think it was terribly managed by Rajoy, but it's not support of anything, right? You could vote 3-4 times in that referendum. It was organized by the ANC and pro-independence parties. 90% of those participating voted yes. There were no democratic guarantees, no committee that guaranteed the neutrality of the results. So it's basically absolutely invalid, right? So we can talk about anything, but it needs to be within the law. It needs to be within the rules that we have established throughout the last 40 years to talk. If not, it's just unilateralism, and it's not very different from other nationalist movements we've seen in Europe and populist movements we've seen in Europe, what the nationalist Catalan government has become now.
Jordi, I see you reacting to what Tony is saying there, so I want to give you a chance to jump in. What are your thoughts to what you were hearing from Tony?
Well, basically what they're playing at is catch-22. In other words, you can be pro-independence, but you can't have independence. Years ago, a former Prime Minister of Spain said that you can talk about anything you like as long as there's no violence. The issue is, of course, that with Ciudadanos backing Toni Roldan's party for the oppression that's been made, obviously I'm using the word oppression because that was made absolutely clear in the police violence during the referendum, even if it was considered a mock referendum and it was illegal or even illegal. I mean, what's the point of beating up old ladies and kids and also, you know, people who just did not lift a finger in violent reaction? I mean, it's absolutely obvious that this is oppression, that this is using an authoritarian stance with the full backing of Ciudadanos throughout. So I don't know, you know, it's pretty laughable, Toni Roldan saying that, you know, it's the fault of the PP government and that they had nothing to do with it and they're very sorry it happened that way. I mean, Rajoy has had constant support from Ciudadanos as long as it was concerning the Catalan movement for greater self-government. Whether that becomes independence or not, that's another issue. But there's been absolute stonewalling all the time. Ever since 2010, when the PP got a ruling that the former statute had certain illegal articles which absolutely maimed that Catalan constitution, because that effectively, the statutes in Spain are effectively the regional constitution.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to go to Gabriel for a question here because I want to step back for a minute and take the wider view here when it comes to the region. I want to talk specifically about the EU's stance. I mean, Europe's leaders have shown little sign of budging from their position that Catalonia's independence is a matter for Madrid. Is that stance going to remain?
Well, in my opinion, there are here a couple of dilemmas and are of course related. I mean, the Spanish state in itself, and of course the Spanish government has here a political problem. And it's not sufficient just to throw law as an answer, because law has to be as well, you know, adaptive and shapeable towards the political things going on. And of course, there's an important part of the Catalan society that wants to have a referendum. Maybe they want to vote yes, maybe they want to vote no, but there is a huge part of the Catalan population that thinks that this political conflict has to be solved through a referendum. So that's one of the dilemmas. The other dilemma, of course, is within the pro-independence ranks. Because if you want to have a unilateral referendum, you need a huge majority. And you need to consider the probability of coercion and conflict being present. So there is not a magical formula for this. You can't get secession in a state with the 40% of the electorate and without any kind of coercion. So that's another dilemma that has to be solved there. And then there's, of course, the whole European Union situation, We don't have, of course, in the European Union, at least now, any kind of jurisprudence in that regard. There was a secession referendum also in the UK for Scotland. I think that's one of the ways forward. But the European Union debate, it's to me an ulterior debate, because what matters, at least in that very moment, is how in the Spanish state you try to accommodate these different political visions and how you try to articulate that. Because many people would deny, but to me there's a clear political problem here that has to be solved. Of course, both ranks try to, bring things to their own political position and try to push for that. But at some point we just need to get an agreement here and try to find a way to solve it. Then, if by any chance there's a proper referendum recognized by the Spanish state, and the European Union believes that a secessionist part of that state cannot be directly integrated in the European Union, that would be another debate.
Tony, let's talk about the 9 Catalan leaders who are currently in jail and awaiting trial. Is there any chance that they could be released? And is this the major obstacle when it comes to negotiations going forward?
Look, the situation of these political leaders is something that was perfectly predictable, in the sense that they were saying for a while, look, I'm going to go ahead with this unilateral claim of independence. We don't care about what the Constitutional Court says. We will, and they said it publicly in a number of occasions, that we will continue with our mandate of the people, whatever that means, to go ahead and break with Spain, who's the evil people that is trying to repress and oppress us, as the previous commentator was arguing, right? But the truth is that they were advised, they were told, look, if you try to break up the constitution and break up the country and throw Catalonia outside of the EU and lead the country to a spectacular economic crisis, there will be obviously legal consequences, right? I'm convinced of the democratic intentions of some of these leaders, but they need to understand that without rules there is only chaos, right? There is only chaos, and there needs to be consequences if you try to break up a country without respecting the democratic process and without respecting the constitution, right? In other countries, pro-independence parties are not even allowed to exist. In Germany, for instance, right? In Spain, they exist. They obviously are represented. It's great they are represented. It's great that the diversity we have in Spain is represented everywhere. But when you try to subvert the rights and ignore the rights of the other half of Catalans that seem not to exist for nationalists, and also violate the rights of all Catalan, of all Spanish people that voted for a constitution, then obviously this has consequences, right? In terms of the dialogue, look, I think there needs to be space. Catalonia is the biggest economic powerhouse of Spain. It's about 20% of Spanish GDP. They have a great amount of autonomy already. They manage the public health, they manage education, they have autonomy in managing language policy. We can improve that for sure. There are ways. We've proposed a number of things to improve investments. We can talk about their contribution, their solidary contribution to the rest of Spain. But this doesn't seem to be what they want. They just want to break up. And to break up, they don't have a majority. And we've seen it, as I said before, for 4 times already in 4 elections. Either they accept reality and they accept that they've been selling, like many other populist movements in Europe, they've been selling their people lies one after the other. Or if not, it's simply there is no space for dialogue. Right?
Jordi, what kind of headway have talks between regional and national administrations yielded? I mean, is it only economic issues or economic deals that have been reached so far?
Well, as Mr. Roldan said, in Germany there's no pro-independence, there's no contemplation of pro-independence. That's pretty obvious. I mean, if we were to belong to the to the German Federation, I think the Catalans would be pretty happy with their deal. The thing is, in Spain, there is absolutely no respect for language, for Mr. Roldan's party have been promoting the idea that there should be re-centralization, in fact. So it's pretty laughable, once again, how Mr. Roldan says that we have all these powers in local government, and his own party is now advocating re-centralization. And if we were so happy, if we should be so happy, it would be extremely odd that, you know, half the population of Catalonia would want to break away from Spain. Not just more power. There are half of us, at least, that's what Mr. Roldan says, we don't really know until there is a referendum,
Jordi,
wants to break away from Spain.
Jordi,
I mean,
I'm sorry.
It's extremely odd, this.
I'm sorry to stop you, but it's just that we're
Mr.
starting to run out of time, and Tony is shaking his head and obviously wants to jump in here, so I want to give a little time here to Tony for your response to what Jordi is saying.
Well, I mean, I wanted to jump in beforehand as well. I mean,
okay,
you know, the situation here, I mean, if you're running a country, you need to ask yourself why it is that half the population of one of your regions wants to leave.
Okay, fair enough. Now, Tony, what's your response to that? And just please be mindful of the fact that we only have a couple of minutes left here.
I'll try to be as fast and clear as possible. Look, it's absolutely false what this member of ANC is saying. I studied in Barcelona. I studied in Catalan 90% of all my subjects. It's a vehicular language you use in all public schools. There is no problem with Catalan. You can express everywhere freely. Not only that, but Catalan nationalist governments over the last 40 years have been paying loads of money to promote Catalan, and I find it great. Catalan is a great language. It just they try to find enemies where they don't exist. And throughout the crisis, which was very, very hard, the scapegoat Catalan nationalism found not only to the crisis, but also to hide a number of huge corruption scandals they had. The elites managed to build this narrative where all the problems, I mean, I'm sure many people listening has some memories of what happened in Brexit, right? It's not that different. Just all the problems are from Brussels. Brussels is stealing us. It's the same story. Madrid steals us our money. They don't respect us. It's not true. They have been building their narrative on lies, right? In Catalonia, there are things we can improve. I'm sure
there must be something wrong.
But the disastrous consequences of a unilateral vote, also in a binary vote of yes, no, it is so hard to capture all the complexities that people want. Catalonia and Barcelona are cosmopolitan societies with multiple identities. They are not all dependent on nationalism.
Tony,
I think there is a
Tony,
a very
Tony, I'm going to have to stop you there because we are running out of time. I want to give the last word here to Gabriel. Gabriel, could you just quickly, we only have about a minute left, talk about the deep divisions that still remain in Catalonia, in society there?
Well, of course, Catalan society is in itself a divided society. I mean, I don't know any society in the world that is not divided. So, of course, we have complexities. Of course, we have different groups of people believing some things. But to me, this argument that with more money, a better budget and better relationship with the central government, this is going to run out. This is completely false, in my opinion, because to me there's a political problem. Of course, we can talk here if it's a matter of nationalism, if it's a matter of these modern times in which there are reactions to globalization. We can debate the nature of it, but of course it's a political problem that comes from a long time ago. And Catalan society is divided in itself. A referendum is not a good instrument. Never it is, but maybe it's the solution.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all our guests, Jordi Villanova, Tony Roldan, and Gabriel Garum. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Mohammed Jamjoom, and the whole team here in Doha, bye for now.